The moment someone pretends to wear authority they never earned, they're already losing. They just don't know it yet. The first thing I noticed that morning wasn't the row of black SUVs parked across the entrance to my ranch. It wasn't the flashing amber lights reflecting off the steel gate I had welded with my own hands nearly 12 years earlier. It wasn't even the men wearing dark tactical uniforms with bold patches that read HOA Compliance Division, as though those words alone gave them the power to decide who belonged on my own property. It was the silence. Every sunrise on my ranch usually began with familiar sounds. Horses shifting inside the barn, wind brushing through towering cottonwood trees, meadowlarks greeting another Colorado morning, the distant creak of my weather vane turning with the breeze. But that morning the silence felt deliberate, like the land itself was waiting to see what I would do next. My name is Jack Sullivan, and I own 64 acres of ranch land that has been in my family longer than anyone currently serving on our neighboring homeowners association has even lived in this county. I never joined their HOA because my property sits entirely outside its legal boundaries, a fact confirmed by county records more than once. That detail should have ended every argument before it began. Instead, it somehow became the reason they obsessed over me. For nearly a year, they mailed notices claiming my horse barn violated neighborhood standards. They complained about my split-rail fencing, my equipment shed, the old pickup parked beside the workshop, even the color of the metal roof I had installed with every required county permit. Every letter arrived more ridiculous than the last, and every response I sent included copies of surveys, permits, and recorded deeds proving they had absolutely no authority over my ranch. Facts never seemed to slow them down. They simply invented another accusation. As I stepped onto my front porch holding a mug of black coffee, the cool mountain air carried the scent of pine needles and fresh-cut hay across the pasture. A man wearing mirrored sunglasses unfolded a clipboard while another adjusted a body camera clipped to his vest. One woman in a navy blazer stood confidently beside them, pointing toward my barn as though she were giving orders on someone else's land. Behind them, two flatbed trailers sat ready, their ramps lowered onto the gravel shoulder. It looked less like an inspection and more like a carefully rehearsed performance. One of the uniformed men raised his voice just enough for me to hear across the yard. "Mr. Sullivan, under HOA Enforcement Authority, this property is being placed under immediate compliance review." I took another slow sip of coffee before walking toward the gate. "Interesting," I replied. I wasn't aware private associations suddenly outranked county law. His expression never changed. "You'll have plenty of opportunities to discuss that later." I glanced toward the long dirt road disappearing over the eastern ridge beyond my pastures. The sunlight had only begun touching the tops of the hills, painting them gold, while a light mist still floated above the creek running through the lower meadow. To everyone standing outside my gate, it probably looked like I was simply buying time. They couldn't have known I was listening for something. Then it happened. Faint at first, almost hidden beneath the wind. A low rumble rolled across the valley, so distant it could have been mistaken for approaching thunder. My eyes stayed fixed on the horizon while the men at the gate continued arranging paperwork and setting portable traffic cones across my entrance. The woman in the blazer smiled as though the outcome had already been decided. She had no idea that every security camera on my ranch was recording. She had no idea the county survey stakes still marked every property line with unmistakable precision. Most of all, she had no idea that the sound slowly growing louder beyond the ridge wasn't a storm. It was the unmistakable rhythm of dozens of Harley engines traveling together, and every rider coming down that road already knew exactly whose land they were about to enter. The sound of those engines carried me backward through years of memories long before a single motorcycle appeared over the ridge. People who only saw my ranch from the highway assumed it had always looked this way, with white fences stretching across green pasture, a red horse barn standing against the foothills, and a cedar farmhouse overlooking a small creek that never seemed to run dry. They never saw the first day I unlocked the rusted gate after buying the property. Back then, the barn leaned several inches to one side. The roof leaked every time it rained. The fences had collapsed in 3 different pastures, and weeds taller than my shoulders covered most of the old riding arena. I was 33 years old, working as a mechanical engineer during the week while spending every weekend driving nearly 3 hours just to repair another small piece of the place. Most people called it too much work. I called it home long before it deserved the name. Every improvement came one project at a time. I replaced broken fence posts by hand instead of hiring contractors. I rebuilt the barn using reclaimed timber from neighboring ranches that were being renovated. I installed a modern drainage system so spring runoff would never flood the lower pasture again. Every permit came directly from the county office. Every inspection passed without a single correction. I kept copies of every receipt, every blueprint, every signed document inside the same weathered canvas document bag that now rested on the passenger seat of my pickup truck. Friends often joked that I trusted paperwork as much as I trusted my toolbox. They were not wrong. Living outside city limits teaches you that good records solve arguments before they ever become lawsuits. The horses arrived one by one over the years. Daisy came first after retiring from therapeutic riding programs. Then Ranger, an old quarter horse with more personality than patience. Eventually the pastures filled with rescued animals that needed quiet more than attention. That was one reason I bought so much land. Peace cannot be measured in acres, but it certainly needs room to breathe. My nearest neighbors understood that better than anyone. We borrowed tractors, shared fencing supplies, helped move cattle after heavy snowstorms, and never kept score because everyone knew the favor would come back around eventually. The neighboring homeowners association existed several miles away beyond a line of rolling hills where expensive houses surrounded an artificial lake. For years, we barely noticed each other. Then new leadership arrived promising stricter standards and expanding influence. At first, the letters seemed almost harmless, asking whether I intended to repaint my barn to better complement surrounding architecture. I laughed because there was no surrounding architecture except open pasture and mountain sky. Then came notices questioning my livestock fencing, complaints about equipment visible from roads that did not even belong to the subdivision, and warnings that my utility trailer created an unacceptable appearance. Each claim ignored the same simple fact. My ranch had never been inside their jurisdiction. Every response I mailed included certified county maps with highlighted property boundaries, recorded deeds, tax records, and official survey plats. Weeks later, another letter would arrive pretending the previous exchange had never happened. I eventually realized this had stopped being about rules. Someone wanted control simply because they disliked hearing the word no. That was why I invested in additional security cameras covering every entrance, every gate, and every section of roadway leading onto the ranch. Not because I expected trouble, but because experience had taught me that facts are strongest when they can be seen instead of merely described. Standing near my front gate that morning, hearing the distant rumble growing stronger across the valley, I remembered every hour spent rebuilding this place with my own hands. Nobody standing outside that fence understood what this ranch represented. They saw property. I saw 20 years of honest work, countless early mornings, and promises kept. And if they believed a clipboard and matching uniforms could erase all of that, they were about to receive an education they would never forget. By the time the rumble on the horizon grew louder, the people gathered outside my gate still believed they controlled the situation. They moved with the confidence of individuals who had rehearsed every step. One man carefully unfolded orange barricades across the entrance. Another photographed my mailbox from 3 different angles as though collecting evidence for a criminal investigation. The woman in the navy blazer opened a thick binder filled with printed forms and nodded toward the barn before speaking quietly with the men wearing tactical uniforms. None of them seemed interested in asking questions. They had arrived expecting compliance, not conversation. That attitude had become familiar over the previous 12 months. Every few weeks, another certified envelope appeared inside my mailbox, carrying fresh accusations that looked official enough to intimidate someone unfamiliar with property law. One notice claimed my horse trailers violated neighborhood parking restrictions even though the nearest subdivision entrance sat several miles away. Another insisted my livestock fencing failed to meet architectural guidelines written for decorative backyard fences surrounding quarter-acre lots. One letter demanded approval for replacing barn windows that had existed longer than the homeowners association itself. Every accusation ignored the same county survey attached to my replies. At first, I assumed simple mistakes explained everything. I even drove to one community meeting carrying rolled property maps and certified copies of my recorded deed. I politely explained that my ranch had never been annexed into their association and that county officials had confirmed the boundary several times over the years. Some residents listened with genuine curiosity. Others quietly apologized for the confusion. But the board members barely looked at the documents before moving on to the next agenda item, as though facts only complicated a decision they had already made. After that evening, the letters became noticeably more aggressive. Fines increased without explanation. Inspection notices appeared without appointments. Anonymous complaints referenced activity that supposedly occurred on days when security cameras showed an empty driveway. One afternoon, I found bright orange violation tags hanging from my front gate despite the fact that nobody had permission to enter my property. I removed them, photographed everything, saved the recordings, and added another folder to my growing collection of evidence. My attorney often smiled whenever I arrived carrying the weathered canvas document bag, because he knew it contained organized records rather than emotional arguments. He once told me that patience leaves a paper trail while arrogance usually leaves fingerprints. Those words stayed with me every time another letter arrived. Instead of arguing, I documented. Instead of raising my voice, I requested written clarification. Instead of assuming, I verified every statement with the County Land Records Office. That quiet routine eventually revealed a pattern. The association was gradually expanding its influence beyond subdivision boundaries, counting on property owners to surrender rather than challenge questionable claims. Most people simply paid small fines because hiring legal counsel seemed more expensive than writing a check. I understood the temptation, but surrendering even once would have implied they possessed authority they never legally held. Looking across my front pasture that morning, I watched one uniformed man attach a temporary notice to my locked gate, while another measured the entrance with a tape measure. They acted like a construction crew preparing for a scheduled project instead of visitors standing on private land. The woman in the blazer finally looked toward me with a satisfied smile, clearly convinced this would become another easy victory. She could not hear what I heard. The deep rhythm rolling across the hills had grown stronger, echoing through the valley with unmistakable precision. Several horses lifted their heads toward the eastern ridge at exactly the same moment I did. Even the men outside the gate paused briefly, exchanging puzzled glances as the sound continued growing louder. Whatever confidence they had carried onto my ranch that morning was about to face something they had never included in their carefully written plan. The lead man in the tactical uniform checked his watch before taking 2 deliberate steps toward my locked front gate. His boots crunched across the gravel, while another employee lifted a portable camera onto a tripod facing my driveway. The woman in the navy blazer glanced down at her binder one final time before speaking with complete confidence. "Mr. Sullivan, you have repeatedly refused to comply with community standards. Today we are documenting violations and beginning corrective action." Her voice carried across the morning air as though she expected every word to become unquestioned fact simply because it sounded official. I rested both hands on the top rail of my wooden fence and looked at the temporary notice they had attached to my gate. Across the top, large bold letters declared that the property was under immediate compliance review. Smaller print referenced internal association policies, architectural guidelines, and enforcement procedures, but nowhere did it mention county authority or any state agency. It looked impressive until someone actually read it. "Before you continue," I said calmly, "would you mind identifying the legal authority allowing you to enter private property outside your association boundaries?" The man with the clipboard answered before anyone else could speak. "Our documentation has already established jurisdiction." I smiled politely. "Interesting. Which recorded plat are you relying on?" His expression shifted for only a second before he looked back toward the woman in the blazer. She quickly redirected the conversation. "This discussion has already been settled." "Not with the county, it has not," I replied. Another employee began placing orange traffic cones across the entrance as though preparing to close a public roadway. One of the security officers adjusted the body camera attached to his vest, while another slowly walked toward the horse barn, stopping only when he reached the clearly posted private property sign mounted beside the fence. He hesitated, looked back toward his supervisor, and remained exactly where he was. That tiny moment told me something important. At least one person there understood the difference between confidence and legal authority. The woman in the blazer pointed toward my equipment shed and quietly instructed another employee to photograph every angle. I recognized the routine immediately. They intended to create the appearance of overwhelming evidence regardless of whether any actual violation existed. Fortunately, appearances work both ways. Every one of their movements was already being recorded by the network of security cameras I had installed months earlier. The camera mounted above my front gate captured every vehicle license plate entering the driveway. Another overlooked the barn, while additional cameras monitored the equipment yard, the workshop, and both access roads leading onto the property. Timestamps, audio, and high-resolution video quietly documented everything without emotion or opinion. Facts rarely need dramatic narration. They simply need clear images. The low rumble echoing across the valley had become impossible to ignore now. Even the horses inside the pasture turned their ears toward the eastern ridge. One of the younger employees paused in the middle of setting another cone onto the gravel and looked toward the distant hills. "Do you hear that?" he asked quietly. Nobody answered him. The woman in the blazer continued reviewing paperwork, determined not to acknowledge anything beyond her carefully prepared checklist. Then another sound joined the engines. Gravel shifting beneath dozens of tires. The steady rhythm rolled through the valley with remarkable discipline, not hurried, not chaotic, but measured and deliberate. I could finally see sunlight reflecting from chrome beyond the crest of the hill. The first motorcycles had not yet reached my gate, but everyone standing outside my ranch now understood they were approaching together. The confidence that had filled the entrance only minutes earlier slowly gave way to uncertainty. Nobody reached for the next traffic cone. Nobody unfolded another document. They simply stared toward the ridge, waiting to discover who was coming, while I quietly folded my arms and watched the same horizon with complete peace of mind. The first motorcycle appeared over the ridge exactly the way I knew it would, riding at a steady speed with its headlight cutting through the cool morning air. Then another emerged behind it. Then 5 more. Within seconds, the entire line stretched across the winding county road like a perfectly organized procession instead of the chaotic scene the people outside my gate clearly expected. Chrome reflected the rising sun while the deep, familiar rhythm of V-twin engines echoed through the valley before gradually becoming quieter as each rider slowed, approaching my entrance. No one revved an engine for attention. No one shouted. No one performed dramatic maneuvers. Every motorcycle rolled forward with calm precision before parking neatly along the shoulder of the county road without blocking traffic or crossing onto anyone else's property. One by one, the riders removed their helmets. Some wore leather riding jackets displaying club patches earned over decades of membership. Others wore denim vests over plain shirts. Gray hair mixed with younger faces, but every person carried themselves with the quiet confidence that comes from years of discipline rather than intimidation. The woman in the navy blazer looked from one rider to another, her confident smile disappearing almost immediately. I recognized every face stepping off those motorcycles. Mike had spent 28 years as a firefighter before retiring. David owned one of the largest heavy equipment companies in the county. Carlos served as a paramedic for nearly 3 decades. Frank had retired from the sheriff's office after a distinguished career that everyone in town respected. Others were ranchers, electricians, teachers, veterans, mechanics, and small business owners. We had ridden together for years through mountain highways, charity events, veteran fundraisers, children's hospital rides, and community food drives. To outsiders, they looked like a biker club. To me, they were simply trusted friends who believed showing up mattered more than making speeches. Mike walked toward my gate carrying nothing except a travel coffee mug and smiled. "Morning, Jack." "Morning," I answered. "Beautiful day for a ride." He looked toward the gathering outside my entrance before nodding politely toward the woman holding the binder. "Looks like you have company." "Apparently so." One of the tactical employees quietly whispered something to another while glancing toward the line of motorcycles continuing to arrive with remarkable order. Nobody crossed my fence. Nobody interrupted the conversation. They simply stood together beside the county road, greeting one another with handshakes and friendly smiles. Their presence alone changed the atmosphere completely. The younger security officer who had questioned the distant engine noise earlier lowered his clipboard and looked increasingly uncomfortable. He seemed to realize this was no random gathering. These were respected members of the community who clearly knew exactly where they belonged and why they had come. The woman in the blazer tried to regain control by raising her voice slightly. This enforcement action does not concern unrelated spectators. Mike smiled politely before answering. Ma'am, we are standing on a public county road waiting for our friend to finish his morning. His calm tone carried no sarcasm, only simple confidence. Before she could respond, another pickup truck turned onto the road behind the motorcycles. I recognized the county seal on the driver's door long before it stopped beside the gate. A second vehicle followed immediately behind it, displaying the logo of the county land records office. My weathered canvas document bag was already waiting on the hood of my pickup truck, every permit, survey, deed, and inspection report organized exactly where I knew they would be. The people who had arrived expecting to demonstrate authority were about to discover that nothing carries more weight than carefully documented truth arriving at precisely the right moment. The county pickup stopped just outside my gate, followed moments later by a second vehicle from the land records office. Both drivers stepped out wearing ordinary county uniforms instead of tactical gear, carrying clipboards, measuring equipment, and weatherproof document cases. There was nothing dramatic about their arrival, and that was exactly why it mattered. Real authority rarely announces itself with oversized patches or impressive slogans. It simply arrives prepared. I walked back to my pickup, lifted the weathered canvas document bag from the hood, and met them near the entrance. Good morning, Jack, the senior land records specialist said with a friendly smile. I understand we have a boundary question. Apparently we do, I replied, handing him the organized folder containing certified surveys, recorded deeds, tax parcel maps, county permits, and every letter the Homeowners Association had mailed during the past year. He flipped through the documents with practiced efficiency before comparing them to digital parcel records displayed on a rugged tablet computer. Beside him, the county survey technician unpacked a high-precision GPS receiver and carefully positioned it beside the bright yellow survey marker located only a few feet inside my fence. Within minutes, another receiver was placed farther down the property line, while satellite signals quietly confirmed coordinates that had been recorded years earlier. No raised voices interrupted the process. Even the motorcycles remained parked silently along the county road while my friends waited with coffee cups in hand, talking among themselves about weather, ranch work, and weekend plans. The contrast between calm professionalism and earlier theatrical confidence could not have been clearer. The woman in the navy blazer finally stepped forward holding her binder. We have documentation showing this property falls under association oversight, she insisted. The county specialist accepted her paperwork politely, reviewed several pages, then looked back at the digital parcel map displayed on his screen. Ma'am, he said in an even tone, these documents reference subdivision lots that end approximately 1.8 miles west of this location. This ranch has never been included within those recorded boundaries. She immediately pointed toward my entrance road. But residents use this road to reach nearby trails. The specialist nodded. Access does not establish jurisdiction. Recorded property boundaries do. He rotated the tablet so everyone standing nearby could clearly see the county map. Thick colored lines identified every parcel, while my ranch appeared as a completely separate tract surrounded by legally recorded boundary markers that matched the yellow stakes still standing exactly where they had been placed after the last certified survey. The technician finished verifying the final coordinate before announcing, measurements matched the recorded plat within accepted tolerance. Hearing those words felt less like a victory than a confirmation of something I had known from the beginning. Facts had finally caught up with assumptions. One of the tactical employees quietly removed the temporary notice attached to my gate without being asked. Another began collecting the orange traffic cones they had carefully positioned only an hour earlier. Nobody argued. Nobody protested. They simply recognized that continuing would accomplish nothing. The senior county official closed my document folder and handed it back with a smile. Jack, I recommend keeping these records exactly as organized as they are now. I laughed softly. That has always been the plan. He nodded toward the security cameras mounted above my gate. Those recordings may also prove helpful if anyone has additional questions later. The woman in the navy blazer looked across the quiet line of motorcycles, then back toward the county vehicles, finally realizing that the strongest force assembled that morning had never been the people standing beside the road. It had been documented truth supported by patient preparation, accurate records, and professionals willing to verify every single fact before reaching a conclusion. The morning ended far differently than anyone outside my ranch had expected, but the real turning point came several days later inside a crowded community meeting held at the Homeowners Association clubhouse. Word about what had happened spread quickly throughout the county, not because anyone exaggerated the story, but because so many cameras had captured the exact same sequence of events. My own security system recorded every vehicle arriving at my gate. The body cameras worn by the private security personnel documented their conversations. Several neighbors driving along the county road had also recorded portions of the gathering after seeing the long line of motorcycles parked respectfully along the shoulder. By the end of the week, there was very little room left for misunderstanding. My attorney advised me to remain patient and let the documentation speak before I said another word. That advice proved wiser than anything I could have added. The County Land Records Office completed its written findings, confirming once again that my 64-acre ranch had never belonged to the Homeowners Association and had never been subject to its governing documents. The county survey verification matched every recorded boundary marker exactly. Those same bright yellow survey stakes that had stood quietly beside my entrance for years suddenly became the most important objects in the entire dispute. During the community meeting, the association board presented its version of recent events first. They described their actions as an unfortunate misunderstanding and insisted they had acted in good faith based upon information available at the time. Several residents listened respectfully until my attorney requested permission to display the certified county records alongside the security footage. The room became remarkably quiet. The first video showed employees placing temporary enforcement notices on my locked front gate before any county representative had arrived. The second demonstrated that every warning I had received over the previous year referenced property that official maps clearly placed beyond association boundaries. Then came the county survey verification, complete with GPS measurements, recorded plats, tax parcel maps, and signed documentation confirming the exact legal property lines. Finally, the meeting attendees watched the body camera footage where county officials calmly explained that my ranch existed entirely outside the subdivision. No dramatic speeches followed. None were necessary. Facts presented in chronological order have a unique way of removing confusion without raising anyone's voice. Questions from residents changed almost immediately. Instead of asking why I had refused association notices, they began asking why those notices had been issued at all. One homeowner stood and quietly observed that if such obvious mapping errors could happen to my ranch, similar mistakes might affect other neighboring properties. Another asked whether legal review had occurred before enforcement letters were mailed. Those were fair questions, and they deserved honest answers. The woman in the navy blazer appeared noticeably different from the confident person who had stood outside my gate only days earlier. She acknowledged that mistakes had been made and stated that the board would suspend all enforcement involving properties outside officially recorded subdivision boundaries until additional legal review was completed. The association also agreed to withdraw every notice, violation, and administrative fine previously directed toward my ranch. My attorney accepted the written confirmation without celebration. He simply placed it inside the same weathered canvas document bag that had carried every survey, permit, and deed throughout the entire dispute. Watching those papers disappear into that familiar bag felt strangely satisfying because it completed a circle that had begun months earlier with the first unreasonable letter. I realized then that patience had accomplished something anger never could have achieved. Every carefully saved document, every recorded conversation, every security camera, every survey marker, and every quiet decision to respond with facts instead of frustration had built the foundation for that single afternoon when the truth finally became impossible for anyone in the room to ignore. The weeks that followed felt almost unfamiliar because the steady rhythm of ranch life finally returned without another certified envelope appearing in my mailbox. For the first time in nearly a year, I walked to the front gate expecting nothing more than fresh morning air and the scent of pine drifting across the pasture. The temporary enforcement notices had disappeared. The association's written withdrawal rested safely inside my weathered canvas document bag beside every survey, permit, inspection report, and county record that had carried me through the dispute. I left them there, Not because I expected another confrontation, but because experience had taught me that organized truth is worth preserving long after the argument ends. One crisp Saturday morning, I drove into town for feed supplies and noticed something different almost immediately. People who had only known me through rumors now greeted me by name. Several homeowners from the subdivision stopped to shake my hand, apologizing for believing the stories they had heard before seeing the county findings themselves. One elderly couple admitted they had assumed my refusal to comply meant I simply disliked community rules. After reviewing the public records presented during the meeting, they realized the issue had never been about cooperation. It had always been about respecting legal boundaries. We talked for nearly 20 minutes beside the local hardware store, not about lawsuits or conflicts, but about horses, weather, fencing projects, and the challenges of maintaining property in the mountains. That conversation meant far more to me than winning any argument, because neighbors should know one another through honesty rather than assumptions. Back at the ranch, the familiar routines returned one by one. Daisy wandered slowly across the lower pasture, while Ranger stood beneath the cottonwood tree that overlooked the creek. I repaired a section of fence damaged by a spring storm, cleaned the workshop, serviced my tractor, and stacked another load of cedar boards beside the barn for a future project I had postponed during the dispute. Every evening, the security camera system quietly continued recording, not because I lived in fear, but because preparation had become part of responsible ownership. One afternoon, several members of our riding club stopped by after finishing a charity event benefiting local volunteer firefighters. Instead of discussing what had happened outside my gate weeks earlier, we shared coffee on the porch overlooking the valley while laughing about old road trips through the Rocky Mountains, unexpected rainstorms, flat tires, and roadside diners that somehow served the best pie in 3 counties. Looking across that porch, I realized none of them had come because they expected trouble. They had come because friendship means showing up before anyone has to ask. As the sun lowered behind the western ridge, one motorcycle after another rolled down my long gravel driveway toward the county road. The sound of their engines gradually faded into the distance until only birdsong and the gentle breeze remained. I stood quietly beside the same wooden gate where everything had unfolded, running one hand across the smooth cedar post I had installed years earlier. The bright yellow survey marker still stood exactly where the county had placed it. The security camera above the entrance continued its silent work. My pickup rested beside the barn, and the weathered canvas document bag waited inside exactly where it belonged. Nothing about the ranch looked extraordinary to someone passing by on the highway, and perhaps that was the greatest reward of all. After months of unnecessary attention, my home had returned to being exactly what I had always wanted it to be. A peaceful place built through patience, protected by preparation, and finally left alone to remain what it had legally been from the very beginning. Several months have passed since that unforgettable morning, and if you drove past my ranch today, you would never guess it had become the center of a dispute that reached county offices, community meetings, and countless conversations across the valley. The entrance looks exactly as it should. The cedar gate stands straight beneath the same cottonwood trees that greeted me every morning long before any disagreement began. The bright yellow survey marker remains firmly planted beside the fence, weathered by sun and snow, but still marking the truth with quiet certainty. Above the entrance, the security camera continues recording every sunrise and every passing season without judgment, preserving ordinary moments instead of extraordinary conflicts. My weathered canvas document bag still rides behind the seat of my pickup truck wherever I go. Every permit, every certified survey, every recorded deed, every inspection report, and every written confirmation remains inside exactly where I placed them. Some people have asked why I keep carrying papers connected to a dispute that has already been resolved. The answer is simple. Those documents no longer remind me of conflict. They remind me that preparation is never wasted, even when you hope you never need it. The motorcycles still visit from time to time, although now their arrival means nothing more than friends stopping by after a weekend charity ride or gathering for coffee before heading toward another mountain highway. The sound that once announced an unexpected turning point has returned to what it always represented in the first place: friendship, loyalty, and people willing to stand beside one another without demanding recognition. Every time I hear those familiar engines echo across the valley, I smile because I remember that nobody came to create a confrontation. They came to support a friend and trust that the truth would speak louder than any accusation ever could. The woman who once stood outside my gate convinced she controlled the outcome never returned to my ranch. I genuinely hope she learned something valuable from everything that happened, because communities become stronger when people respect limits instead of constantly testing them. Authority means very little when it is separated from responsibility, and respect cannot be manufactured through paperwork alone. It grows slowly through honesty, consistency, and a willingness to admit mistakes when facts prove you wrong. Standing on my porch at sunset has become my favorite part of every day again. The horses graze quietly across the lower pasture while the creek reflects the orange glow of the evening sky. Wind moves gently through the pine trees, carrying the same clean mountain scent that greeted me on the morning everything began. Nothing about this view is dramatic anymore, and I would not trade that ordinary peace for anything. Looking back now, I realized the most important lesson had nothing to do with homeowners associations, county maps, or legal boundaries. It was about choosing patience over pride, preparation over panic, and documentation over emotion. Every survey marker, every security camera, every organized folder inside that weathered canvas document bag became another reminder that truth does not need to shout to be heard. It only needs the opportunity to stand on solid ground. My ranch never changed ownership. The land never moved. The county records never changed. The only thing that changed was that eventually everyone else took the time to read them. That is why, every morning when I unlock my gate and step onto the same stretch of gravel leading toward the open pasture, I remember a lesson this place taught me long before anyone tried to challenge it. Justice is rarely loud. It is patient, prepared, and inevitable.